name is María José, and I'm your teacher in Teoría y Análisis del Discurso Literario. We have never met, so I think that's a good opportunity so you can know who you are writing and who is answering your participations in the different activities. First of all, I would like to congratulate you all for the job you've done in the forums. Let me tell you that after teaching so many years, I've never seen so much participation. So I believe that we are going to become, I probably a better teacher, and you definitely autonomous learners, because many of the things that you are doing, I've never seen people participating so much in class. So well done. Another thing I wanted to tell you is that you were not expected to do research on the internet to be able to write an interpretation of the poem. The idea was that on first reading a poem and after 2, 3, or 4 times of rereading the text, you could offer your own interpretation. There are no wrong or right interpretations, and that was not a question of analysis, but mainly I wanted to know what your reaction was towards that poem. This is what we understand as a process that is called literary competence. It's something you learn little by little. So I know that reading poetry is difficult because meaning is very much condensed. That's why you need to understand all the words in a poem. But at the same time, I believe, because the experience has told me, not only personally, but as a teacher, that the more poetry you read, the better you become at interpreting poems. So don't feel frustrated if you don't get the meaning of a poem at first reading. That is the typical thing. That is a normal thing. Sometimes you have to read a poem 2 or 3 or 4 times to make sense of what you're reading. This time I'm going to give you a feedback, and I will organize the feedback around the poems most of you have chosen. So let's start with Macho Man by Zephaniah. The first thing I wanted to tell you is that Zephaniah is a poet from Trinidad, a Caribbean island, and he's a Rafftarian, and he's a performer. That is to say, he performs his poetry. Macho Man was very popular among you, I imagine, because most of you are women, and like many of your classmates say, Macho Man, it's a poem. The theme of the poem is male chauvinism and how the poet takes a critical stanza on the topic. Some of you have pointed out the use of an ironic tone, because the speaker of the poem is making fun of those men who consider themselves macho men by ridiculing them. Matilde, for example, goes one step further, and he analyzes in depth most of the figures of speech that are used to help depict the tone used by the speaker. For example, she says that even though Macho Man has enormous ego and feels that he has the authority and power of a king, his kingdom is merely a small house. Some of you also refer to the repetition to reinforce the stereotype of a macho man. For example, when the repetition on time, food must ready on time, clothes must ready on time, woman must ready on time, right? Many of you also referred to the rhythm of the poem, and this is closely connected to what I said before, that Zephaniah is a performer poet. Some people point out to the use of ungrammatical sentences, and that has to do with Black English, right? And you say that it points to the primitiveness of the macho man, which is a good observation. I've never thought about that, but it's fine. Many of you identify the use of images, especially visual images, to describe the macho man, bulging muscles, drunken eyes, etc. there is a classmate of yours, Paola, who notices the difference that the poet establishes between what a macho man is and what a woman is. So she notices the difference between what it means to be a man and in opposition to a woman. Macho men are defined by their power and violence, while women are very often defined by their submissiveness. All right. If you see that I'm looking at the right, it's because I have my notes there, and I'm checking that I'm telling you everything. All right. So this is a poem about male chauvinism, and the poet is making fun of those men that consider themselves macho in terms of being strong and violent, when in fact they are useless at many other things. Another poem that some of you chose was a tryout. What is interesting about this poem is that it is a narrative poem. Most of poems are lyrical poems, but this is a narrative poem because it tells a story. And it is the story of a boy that is playing basketball in front of a coach that is looking for boys to give them a scholarship. So if they are good enough at basketball, they can get a scholarship at university. While the boy is playing, what he does very, very well, the coach asks him, where did you learn that? And he answers, in high school. But the way he pronounces high school is misunderstood by the coach, that interprets that the boy says, I cool. Consequently, he believes the boy is very arrogant and he doesn't give him the scholarship. So, what is the theme of the poem? The people that chose that poem, none of them referred to the theme. Most of them referred to what the poem was about. Remember that we have to distinguish between the theme and the subject matter of a poem. The subject matter is what I have just told you, what the poem is about. What is the theme? The theme is the importance of pronouncing or speaking English correctly. In this case, it could be the importance of pronunciation, or it could be misunderstanding, or it could be lack of communication, because in fact, the child cannot communicate appropriately with the coach, and that means that he misses the very important scholarship. Now, an important thing in this, in terms of figures of speech, what is interesting here is the use of imagery. There are visual images that help describe the coach, what the university stands for the boy, and there are also kinetic images, those that have to do with movement, that shows to convey how proficient the boy is at playing basketball, how good he is. For example, he said in the first stanza, without missing a beat, he took the one bounce rebound, spun into a layup, grabbed it coming through the strings, lay low to the opposite court, and then it comes the kinetic image. Faked, lipped, drifted and shot. Again, the strings played his song. And there you have the use of a metaphor. The strings played his songs. The strings are the strings of the basketball loop. But at the same time, the poet is finding a comparison between the guitar that has strings and the basketball loop. So in that case is every time the boy scores in the basket, it is as if it played a musical melody, let's say. So there is that comparison between the basketball and the guitar, right? Then, as I said, there are visual images. The ball and the boy were buddies. Buddies are friends. It means that they were all the time together, that he mastered the ball. Okay. Some of you chose the sonnets by William Shakespeare. The first thing you have to know is that a sonnet is a 14-line poem, and there are different types of sonnets. There are English sonnets, Italian sonnets, and Spenserian sonnets. They all have 14 lines, but the way they are organized into stanzas is what makes them English, that it is after, they were called after the sonnets written by Shakespeare, or Italian after the sonnets written by Petrarch, and Spenserian after the English poet Spenser. And Shakespearean sonnet or English sonnet, which are the ones you analyzed, are made up of four stanzas, 3 quatrains. Quatrains are 4-line stanzas, and a couplet, a rhyming couplet. If you look at the poems, you will see that they can be divided into 3 quatrains, 4-line stanzas, and 1 couplet. Let's start with the poem with one of the sonnets. Let's start with sonnet 18, which is the one that says, "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" Very often the sonnets are known by their first line. This sonnet is definitely about the transcendence of beauty. So which is the theme of the poem? Beauty, and how beauty transcends. What is the subject matter of a poem? The poet is addressing a beloved and trying to explain to her why she's much more beautiful than a summer day. Many of you said that the speaker of a poem then compared his beloved to a summer day, and he concludes that she is even more beautiful than the summer day because her beauty does not fade like a summer day. And you have that in the third stanza when it says, "But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest." And you can also prove that by the 4th line in the first stanza when it says, "And summer's lease hath all too short a date." He also compares her to, when he's comparing her to summer, he also makes reference to the weather in summer. Sometimes the weather is too hot, while her beauty is temperate. And to end the poem, he says that her beauty will remain forever as long as people keep on reading this poem. This is a rhyming couplet that says, "So long as men can read or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee." In most of the sonnets, the rhyming couplet at the very end is what somehow summarizes the main ideas of the sonnet. So in the first 3 stanzas, the poet has compared the beloved's beauty to a summer day, has argued that she is better than a summer day because her beauty does not fade, because her beauty is temperate, and that even when she dies, her beauty will not disappear. And he summarizes these 3 points in the couplet that say that her beauty will never fade and will transcend death because he somehow immortalizes her beauty in the poem, and it will last as long as people keep reading this sonnet. All right. The other sonnet some of you chose is the one that begins, "No longer mourn for me when I am dead." And this is sonnet 71. And the people that chose that sonnet, all of you agreed on the fact that the speaker addresses his beloved and asks him to forget him if remembering him could make her suffer. So that would be the subject matter. What is the poem about? It's about a man that is addressing a woman and telling her to forget him after he dies if remembering makes her suffer.